Today's video is about toddlers and boundaries. 1, what makes a healthy boundary? 2, barriers to deciding what a healthy boundary is for you and your family. 3, boundaries and consistency. 4, barriers to being consistent. 5, 4 types of boundaries, examples of each and how I personally set them. 6, respecting children's boundaries. And 7 is the key takeaways from this video. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Mandy J. I'm a conscious parent and a certified completion process practitioner. And today I want to talk about toddlers and boundaries. As a disclaimer, I want to say that making this video was very difficult because with boundaries, there's a lot of variables. And what is a healthy boundary for one person may not be the same boundary for another person. And whether or not a boundary is healthy depends on a lot of different things. Keep that in mind as you watch this video, and I'll be using examples from my own parenting, but just because something is a boundary for me doesn't necessarily mean that it should be a boundary for you. And also know that I did my very best to make this as clear-cut as possible. Secondly, if you have multiple children or you're a single parent, please know that I know that all of this is going to be more difficult. So if you feel triggered during this video because you're like, this is impossible what you're expecting of me, then I want you to know that that makes sense to be frustrated, and it is going to be a lot more difficult for you. And also, I thank you for doing your best to raise happy and emotionally healthy humans. Lastly, if you disagree with something in this video, I encourage you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So please just take what resonates and leave the rest to maybe revisit later, because as we grow and evolve as human beings, what resonates with us changes. So what makes a healthy boundary? A healthy boundary is one that reflects love and trust, love for ourselves, and love for our child. And so to start out this video, I want to quote Teal Swan and give her definition of love and trust. To love something is to take it as a part of yourself. It is an experience more than it could ever be a concept. Love is inclusive. It is the energetic movement towards oneness. When you love something, you energetically pull it towards you and include it as you. The exact opposite vibration of love is fear. To fear is to separate something from yourself. Fear is exclusive. It is the energetic movement towards individualization. When you fear something, you push it away and disinclude it from you. Trust cannot be accomplished without love, because to trust is to be able to rely on someone taking your best interests as a part of their own best interests. So here we have trust and love, the two pillars of a good relationship. Both are about taking the other person, their feelings, needs, wants, perspectives, and best interests as a part of your own. There's a lot of things that can cloud our judgment when it comes to deciding whether or not a boundary is healthy or not. When I go to set a boundary with my daughter, I ask myself if the boundary is in her best interests and also in my best interests. If I'm loving her and creating a relationship based on trust, then my boundaries reflect that. Since children aren't able to decide what their best interests are, then that leaves the responsibility on us to decide for them, and a huge responsibility that is. I've come up with 4 things that can cloud our judgment when deciding whether or not a boundary is a healthy one or not. Number 1 is lack of knowledge of child development. So if we're setting a boundary that is in our child's best interests, it's crucial to be educated on what our child is developmentally capable of. So as an example, the part of the brain that controls impulse isn't developed until age 3 or 4. So if we're setting a boundary that expects our child to control their impulses, we're actually not setting a boundary that is in their best interests. The second thing I've come up with that is a barrier to deciding what a healthy boundary is or not is other people's judgments. So if we fear how other people are going to react to the boundaries we set and how we set them, then that is seriously going to cloud our judgment about whether or not something is a healthy boundary. I encourage you to set healthy boundaries with the judgmental people in your life and also to honor your own authority as the parent. Number 3 is thoughts and beliefs. So another thing that can cloud our judgment of whether or not a boundary is healthy is our own thoughts and beliefs. So as an example, a lot of people believe that a child should hug their family goodbye after a family get-together. And while this is nice, the question is it really in our child's best interests? It's crucial to ask ourselves where our beliefs come from, whether or not they're true or they just seem true, and whether or not they are in fact in our child's best interests. This is an example of a conscious belief, but there are also subconscious beliefs that drive our decisions. Number 4 is triggers. So when we're triggered enough to be in fight, flight, or freeze mode, the hypothalamus actually hijacks the rest of the brain and it sends signals to the rest of the brain to shut down the part of the brain in charge of reasoning. So it's pretty easy to see that when we're triggered, we are actually incapable of deciding healthy boundaries for ourselves and our children. Teal has an awesome article about how the brain works when we're triggered, and I'll also link that in the description box. This is why healing our own inner child is crucial. The more that we heal our own emotional wounds, the less triggered we'll be in our day-to-day life and we'll be able to show up for our kids. Next, I want to talk about boundaries and consistency. So consistency and follow-through are key when it comes to setting boundaries with our children. When our children don't know what to expect from us, whether that's inconsistency in how we treat them or inconsistency with our boundaries, it actually is showing our child that they cannot trust us. This is what leads to tantrums and testing. Toddlers will always test our boundaries, but the more calm and consistent we are, and the better equipped we are at handling their emotional reactions, the less testing and the less tantrums. When you set a boundary and you consistently stick to that boundary, this builds trust with your child. They know that when you say something, you're going to follow through with that, and you're going to be calm about it no matter what. Next, I want to talk about 4 things that get in the way of our consistency with boundaries. Number 1 is when our environment doesn't set us up for success. So with our children, our toddlers, it's crucial to set up a yes space. This is a space where they can play freely or pretty much freely without having to set boundaries all the time. And you as the parent, this is also in your best interest. You have to be able to get things done around the house, to just be able to sit down and relax for a minute. And this will help you out immensely in reducing triggers and reducing stress. Number 2, and in my opinion, this is the biggest barrier, is when we feel inequipped to handle our children's emotions. Meaning that when they have a big emotion, we have anxiety about it. Our children will have sadness, anger, disappointment, even rage over some of the boundaries we set. All of these emotional reactions are natural, valid, and they make sense. When we're not okay with our child's emotional reaction, we're more likely to give in because we're afraid of how they're going to react, or we're more likely to shame them, dismiss, or ignore their emotions. To be able to set consistent boundaries, it's crucial to learn how to and feel equipped to handle our children's emotions about those boundaries. To learn how to do this, watch my videos on mirroring and validation and empathy and attunement, and I will link those in the description box as well. And the third one is judgment from others. So when we're concerned about what other people think about our parenting, you can see that this would have a great impact on our consistency. Because if we're afraid of, let's say, what someone's going to think of our boundary, or then that they're going to judge our boundary if our child has an emotional reaction to it, and then they're going to judge our child for having the emotional reaction they're having, this can have a huge impact on our consistency. Number 4 is our conscious and subconscious beliefs. So our own beliefs can get in the way of staying consistent in our boundaries. For example, if we have a subconscious belief that it's our job to make sure our child isn't upset and never gets upset, then that can really affect whether or not we stay consistent in our boundaries. If we have a subconscious belief, let's say, that we don't know what we're doing as a parent, our own insecurities about our parenting can absolutely affect our consistency. So it's really crucial to get clear with yourself about what your beliefs are about the world, about yourself, and how they're affecting your ability to stay consistent. So number 5 is triggers. Just like triggers have an impact on our ability to choose what a healthy boundary is, it also seriously has an impact on our consistency. So if we're trying to consistently set a boundary and our child is resisting that boundary and then we end up triggered, then we can absolutely be inconsistent, because when we're triggered, we might give in, we might shame them, and so we're being inconsistent in how we're treating them, or we're being inconsistent in the boundary. Next, I want to talk about 4 types of boundaries, an example of each, and then how I personally set them. Once again, keep in mind that the way I do this might not be the way that you want to do it. And so I'm just using myself as an example. This doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly the way I do. First type of boundary is a safety boundary, and I've divided this into 2. Urgent safety boundaries and non-urgent safety boundaries. So this is like touching something hot, climbing on things, holding sharp objects, small things they can choke on. So with safety boundaries, I always set them by saying, I can't let you blank, name the behavior, that's not safe, as I'm physically stopping her from doing whatever she's doing. And I'm also prepared to physically and calmly set the boundary multiple times. And at home, this is much easier because we have it set up as a yes space. And if it's at all possible, I set her up for success by adjusting the environment. So if she's doing something that I don't want her to do, maybe I need to take her into a different room, or I need to move something that's of danger to her. It's in her best interest for me to do that rather than expect her to not play with it. Now, even though we have our house set up as a yes space, there's still times that I have to set a safety boundary. So for example, Harper loves to climb on the coffee table. So when she does this, I'll say, I can't let you climb on the table, that's not safe, and then I will physically help her down from the table. When she first learned to climb on the coffee table, I had to set this boundary multiple times, but now that it's a standard and she trusts that I'm going to take her down every time, she doesn't have to test it as much. Now, if she keeps climbing on the table, then what I'll do is I'll remove her from the room with the table. So first I'll validate her. I'll be like, oh wow, it's really hard for you not to climb on that because it's so fun. That makes sense that you want to climb. That's really fun to get up high where you can see everything. But it's not safe, so I can't let you climb on there, as I'm helping her down again. And then I'll say, if you need to keep climbing, then we'll have to go in your room so that you're not tempted by this table. And usually this would be enough, but if she continued to climb, then I would simply take her in her room. And if she had an emotional reaction to that, I would care for the emotion. I want to talk a little bit too about urgent safety boundaries. So with an urgent safety boundary, this is the only time that I will set a boundary with a firm no. And these are the instances where I perceive that she's going to get hurt and I'm not going to be able to physically stop her before she gets hurt. So these instances are very rare, and when you reserve a firm no for these moments, your child actually hears you. Next, I want to talk about socially acceptable boundaries. So this is like appropriate behavior at other people's houses. This is, grabbing toys out of other kids' hands, screaming in public, throwing things, hitting. With these types of boundaries, it's also important to set yourself up for success. So if you want to hang out with a friend and you know that their house is not kid-friendly, invite them to come to your house. Or if you know that they're supportive and understanding, maybe you could ask them to do a quick baby proofing before you go over. Ask them to put up some items that they don't want touched. This way you won't be stopping your child and setting a boundary every other minute, because this is frustrating for toddlers and it's also frustrating for you, and you can't give your attention to your friend or family member because you're having to give all of your attention to your child. So as an example, if Harper's playing with something that I don't want her to play with, I'll just say, I can't let you play with that. That's not for us to play with. I'm gonna help you stop. And then I'll help her. And then, or I'll move the object. So if moving the object out of the way is an option, I'll do that. With the example of taking a toy out of a child's hand, I'll say, oh, I can't let you take that from Violet. She was playing with that. I'm going to help you give it back now. And then I'll tend to her emotional reaction as I give it back to the child. And then I might say, you can have a turn when she's finished, or what can we play with instead while we wait? Boundaries that you cannot physically set are the most difficult and the ones where parents are most tempted to use harshness and shaming tactics. So let's use one we all know, which is screaming in public. With Harper, I'll say, oh, we have to be quiet here because when we're loud, it disturbs other people. Can we be so quiet? So far, every time I've done this, Harper has obliged my request. Now, if she hadn't, I would say, if you need to scream, then we need to go out to the car because it disturbs people when we're loud. And then if she continued, I would take her outside. And none of this would happen in a shaming way. The assumption is that if she's having a hard time not screaming, then she needs my support and extra love. Many parents make the assumption that their child's being malicious or controlling, and this is one of the most dangerous things you can do because when we make this assumption, it's really hard to stay calm and gentle. I encourage you to always assume that your child needs extra love and extra support. Next, I want to talk about daily task boundaries. So these are like getting dressed, diaper changes, eating, leaving to go somewhere. The way you set yourself up for success in these instances is you create extra time. So when we're not rushed, all of this goes way smoother. Our toddlers want independence, so giving them opportunities to be independent is crucial. And if we want to give them opportunities to be independent, then we need to leave extra time. We can also do this by offering choices. So with Harper, like let's say diaper change, I'll be like, ooh, what book do you want to bring to your diaper change this time? Or do you want to bring a toy to your diaper change? The other choice I'll offer her is I'll be like, do you want to come over to diaper change on your own or do you need my help this time? Now this one I use all the time and it usually works. She'll be like, Harper, do it, and then she'll run over and do it. But it's really crucial to make sure that if you're going to use this one, that it doesn't come out as a threat. You have to genuinely be offering your help. Because if it comes out as a threat, it's not going to work. They're going to feel that energy and they're going to rebel against it. Another trick you can use is asking them if they know how to do something. So, do you know how to put on your own pants? And then they'll usually jump to try and get on their own, which can get things moving along, right? And also making it fun. So if you can make a game out of it, like getting Harper to go to bed is never a struggle because I make it fun. We chase each other to her room. So I go, oh, it's time to go to your room for bed. Do you want to chase me this time or do you want me to chase you? And she's always like raring to go. When it comes to these daily tasks, the key is preventing power struggles and fostering cooperation. If you're in a power struggle with a toddler, you've already lost. Because it's your job to prevent the power struggle from even happening. You have all the power. I'm sure I'll do a future video just about power struggles, but I did read an article that talks about some ways to prevent power struggles, and I will link that in the description box as well. Next, I want to talk about parents' personal boundaries, and this is one that gets skipped a lot. The first one is parents' physical boundaries. So this is like hitting, climbing on you, pulling your hair. It's important not to shame, especially when they're in the midst of a big emotion. A child cannot determine whether or not they're being shamed for their emotion or they're being shamed for their behavior. If you're shaming the behavior, you're shaming the child. They cannot decipher that their behavior was bad and that they're not. What they need from you is for you to set the boundary consistently and with follow through and calmly. So if Harper keeps hitting me, one thing I'll do is I'll say, I'm still here, but I'm gonna move back because I don't want to get hit. That hurts me. And then I'll just move away to where she can't hit me, but remain present with her. With hitting especially, it's so important to be attuned to your child. So this is an example of why this video is so hard to make, because If Harper were in the midst of like being really angry or really upset, I wouldn't even set the hitting boundary. That's not the time to try and set a boundary because she's not going to hear me. That's the time to just duck out of the way and try not to get smacked and just tend to her emotion and just be there with her and be present and empathize and validate and care for her. And once again, you can watch my video on empathy and attunement for more information on how to attune to your child. Another personal boundary that I want to talk about, which I think gets glossed over a lot, is an I don't want to boundary. So what if you don't feel like reading a book right now, or you don't feel like playing with a toy, or you don't feel like doing any other thing that your child's demanding of you at the moment? And they will demand things of you. This is completely developmentally normal for them to demand things of you because they're experimenting with their power. So in these moments, it is such an opportunity to set a boundary with your child. We enter these shame stories where we're like, if I don't want to read to my kid, then I'm a shitty mom, or if I don't feel like playing right now, then I must be a crappy mom or a crappy dad. First of all, it's not true. We're human, and sometimes we just don't feel like doing things. It doesn't mean you don't love your kid. And these stories are not going to help you. And it's actually not in their best interest for you to force yourself to play with them, right? You are better serving them by setting a boundary and saying, I'm sorry, I really don't want to read another book right now. I'm really tired. I need a break from reading. And then validating and empathizing through whatever emotion they have. I hear you. You really want me to read. That's hard. But I really need a break from reading. Then pause. See their emotional reaction. What can we do instead? Maybe you can read to me, or maybe we could play with this toy. It's okay for you to set these boundaries and honor yourself. And it's okay for them not to like it. That being said, there are things that we don't want to do that we do have to do, like feeding our child. So let's say you're tired and you just don't want to feed your kid. First of all, don't tell the shame story. It doesn't make you a bad mom, it makes you tired. It doesn't make you a bad dad, it makes you not rested. It's crucial to love yourself through these moments. If you shame yourself, you're just going to be exhausted from your own thoughts and then more likely to be triggered throughout the day. This is why it's so important to become aware of our thoughts and how they're affecting us. Validate that you're having a hard time and let yourself feel that without shame. And that leads me to the next personal boundary, which is emotional boundaries. And this is another one of my favorites. So one emotional boundary that I've set with Harper is, no matter what you say or do, I do not shame myself. Our kids bring up unhealed shame in us all the time. It's so important to be aware of this shame and be aware that it's a choice to take on the shame. When your child says something hurtful like, I hate you, you won't be triggered and you'll be able to respond instead of react. Doing healing work like the completion process will change these thought patterns and make it much easier. All boundaries should be set consistently, calmly, and firmly, unless it's the rare, urgent safety boundary. If you're having a hard time doing this, healing your own inner child is crucial. It means that you have childhood trauma related to boundaries, which most of us do. It makes total sense if you're triggered and struggling. As we heal our own inner child, caring for your child's emotions and setting consistent boundaries gets easier and easier. I help parents heal their own inner child using the completion process. And if you're interested in hearing more about the completion process, please watch my video, What is the Completion Process and How It Can Change Your Life? And I will also link that in the description box. I want to say a little bit too about respecting our children's boundaries. Whenever possible, it's important to respect a boundary your child is setting, especially when it comes to their own body. This teaches them that it's safe to set boundaries and that other people should respect their boundaries. Just before writing this, I was in the room rocking Harper down for a nap, and I kissed her on top of the head and she said, "No kisses." And so I was authentic in that moment. I said, oh, it's so hard for me not to kiss you because I love you so much, but I will do my very best not to kiss you. Thank you for telling me what you want. I want to leave you with 6 takeaways from this video. So number 1 is question your motives. Really dig into your beliefs, your conscious and subconscious beliefs. Most commonly, this belief that we have to control our child or they'll be out of control. Our need for control gets in the way of deciding what healthy boundaries are and holding them consistently all the time. Which leads to number 2. Does this boundary reflect my child's best interests and my best interests? Number 3, before I set a boundary, do I have a plan for gentle follow-through? With Harper, before I set a boundary, I assume that I'm going to have to physically set the boundary. This way, when she shows me that she needs my help, I don't feel disappointed that she didn't obey me, which leads to not being triggered. Number 4, set boundaries consistently, calmly, and firmly. Number 5, and I can't stress this enough, do healing work. When we heal our own inner child, setting boundaries gets easier and easier, and you're less triggered, and so you're more likely to speak from a place of love. And number 6, learn how to handle your children's emotions, because when we know how to deal with our child's emotions and we feel confident in that, we are more likely to hold our boundaries. You can learn more about this once again by watching my videos on empathy and attunement and mirroring and validation. Thank you for watching, everyone. I know that this video will most likely bring up a ton of questions, so please don't hesitate to ask questions either in the comments or via email, which I'll put up at the end of this video. I want to personally thank you for your efforts in raising happy and emotionally healthy humans. This parenting journey is not easy, so just remember to be gentle with yourself. Namaste.